Every night, I slept in the arms of the man I believed was my safe haven. But when I picked up the wallet he had forgotten, I uncovered a plan. A scheme he and my best friend had devised to kill me and take everything I owned. I am Naomi Bennett, and that night marked the beginning of a transformation from which there was no turning back.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Naomi Bennett. I'm 39 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. They say intuition is a woman's sixth sense. If that's true, mine didn't whisper that night. It screamed. I remember the exact time, 2:17 a.m. My eyes snapped open like I'd just surfaced from a nightmare I couldn't remember. The room was dark, but not the kind of dark that invites rest. It was hollow, tense. Terrence's side of the bed was cold. Not just cold, empty. I sat up, the silk sheets pooling around my waist. My heartbeat wasn't racing, but it was alert. The kind of beat you get when you walk into a room and instantly feel eyes on you, even when no one's there. It was in that moment, in the stillness of our beautifully furnished bedroom, that I admitted something I hadn't said out loud, not even to myself. I don't know this man anymore. Terrence and I had been married 3 years. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was slow, calculated, perfect on paper. A handsome entrepreneur with charm and ambition. And me, Naomi Bennett, gallery director with a growing reputation in Atlanta's art scene. Everyone thought we were a power couple, and maybe for a while, we were. But lately, I'd been waking up more and more to these empty beds and excuses that smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't his. I got up and padded to the kitchen, the cool wood floor grounding me. That's when I saw it. His wallet. Terrence never forgot his wallet. Never. He was meticulous to the point of neurosis. If you opened his nightstand, you'd find his cufflinks arranged by shape and color. Forgetting his wallet was like me forgetting my name. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. Something inside twisted. I tried calling him. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. That's when the ache in my gut hardened into something sharper. Curiosity mixed with dread. I didn't even stop to think. I slipped on jeans, a sweatshirt, and sneakers, grabbed my purse and keys, and ordered an Uber to Hartsfield-Jackson. I figured I'd hand-deliver the wallet. It was a simple excuse, logical, even. But deep down, I knew I was chasing a feeling I couldn't name yet. The driver pulled up, a black Suburban with tinted windows. He rolled down the passenger window. Naomi? Yes. He didn't smile, just unlocked the doors. Airport? I nodded. Terminal C. Hop in. The inside of the car smelled faintly of leather and pine. The driver was a big man, maybe mid-40s, clean-shaven with calm eyes. The dashboard read, Clarence. We pulled onto the highway. The night sky outside looked like brushed velvet, heavy and endless. Clarence didn't make small talk, which I appreciated. But after a few minutes, I noticed him glancing at me in the rearview mirror. You okay, ma'am? I hesitated. Yeah, just a little, off tonight. Off's better than gone, he said. I didn't know what that meant. I let it go. We were 10 minutes out when everything shifted. He turned onto the ramp leading into the departure lanes, then abruptly stopped just short of the curb. Then, click. He hit the lock button, all 4 doors locked. What are you doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Don't get out, he said firmly, eyes still forward. Stay inside. Trust me. His tone wasn't threatening. It was calm, serious, controlled. Excuse me? My pulse quickened. I'm not going to hurt you. Look in the side mirror. I turned my head. At first, all I saw were the blinking lights of the terminal, and then a man, pacing near the entrance, clutching something bulky under his jacket. A security officer approached, and suddenly, everything exploded. The man bolted. Security shouted. Guns drawn. Screams. The man yanked something from his coat. I flinched instinctively, heart crashing in my chest. My breath caught. Within seconds, 2 officers tackled him to the ground. Something metallic, maybe a weapon, slid across the pavement. I sat frozen, hands shaking in my lap. He would have walked right into you, Clarence said softly. You were his line of sight. I turned to look at him. How did you know? He finally glanced back at me. Because I've seen people like him before. And I've seen people like you walk into danger thinking the world is safe. Something about the way he said it made me pause. Who are you? He pulled slightly to the side, out of the way of the chaos, and turned to face me fully. My name is Clarence Johnson. I used to be on your mother's security team. The air left my lungs. My mother's been gone for 5 years. He nodded. Yes, ma'am, but before she passed, she asked me for one favor. Just one. What was it? To keep an eye on you, quietly, in case life ever put you in a situation where you couldn't see the threat. I stared at him, disbelief settling like fog in my chest. She said you were strong, that you had more heart than most, but heart can make you vulnerable, and she was worried. I blinked hard, trying to make sense of his words. You expect me to believe you just happened to be my Uber driver tonight? No, he said plainly. I wasn't assigned to you through the app. I was already nearby when I saw the ride request under your name. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or demand answers, but something in his voice, calm, clear, protective, cut through the noise in my head. I looked down at the wallet still clenched in my hand. I came to bring this to my husband, Terrence. Clarence's jaw tightened. You sure about that? What do you mean? He pointed up toward the terminal windows. Look, there, gate 32. I followed his gaze. At first, all I could see were shadows, and then Terrence, my husband, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of the boarding gate. Not frantic, not worried about a forgotten wallet, no. He was calm, composed, and not alone. Marla, my best friend since college, my maid of honor. She was standing beside him, close, too close. They weren't holding hands like lovers, but their body language screamed intimacy, tension. They were arguing, faces tight, eyes sharp, not scared, angry. Then it hit me. This wasn't a getaway in progress. It was a plan unraveling. My heart fell out of my chest. The world tilted. The window fogged. My vision went tunnel. I couldn't hear Clarence's voice anymore. The sounds of the airport, the intercom, the rolling luggage, the laughter, all of it faded into a low, painful hum. Everything I had ignored, the late nights, the distant kisses, the lingering looks between them at dinner parties, it all clicked into place. And I was the fool who brought the wallet. I sat back in the seat, tears blurring my vision, not from sadness, but rage. Clarence put a hand on the wheel. Do you want to go up there? I shook my head. No. What do you want to do? I looked down at the leather wallet, then up at the man beside me, then back at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back, but I would, and soon, they would too. If you've ever had the ground shift beneath your feet, not from an earthquake, but from a revelation, then you'll understand how I felt in that moment. I wasn't cold, but I shivered. I wasn't crying, but my throat was tight. I wasn't lost, but I had no idea where I was standing anymore. Just moments ago, I thought I was bringing my husband his wallet, a simple, harmless act of kindness. Now I was sitting in a locked car with a stranger who claimed to have known my mother, watching the man I married stand at gate 32 with my best friend, arguing like co-conspirators whose plan had just unraveled. Everything in me wanted to scream, to storm out, to throw the damn wallet in his face and ask him who the hell he really was. But something stronger held me still. Clarence. He sat beside me, calm as ever. There was no panic in him, no smugness, just presence. Like he'd been waiting a long time for this moment, not to tell me the truth, but to watch me find it myself. Talk to me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You said you knew my mother, that she asked you to protect me. He nodded. Elaine saved my life, twice, actually. First when I was 23 and spiraling. Then again when she saw something in me no one else bothered to. She gave me purpose and trust. You were her bodyguard. I was her shadow, he said, his tone respectful. I worked behind the scenes. No suits, no sunglasses, she hated that. Thought it made people feel unsafe instead of secure. I let that sit for a second. That sounded like Mom. She never mentioned you, I murmured. She wasn't supposed to. That was our agreement. Only step in if something ever felt off. And this? I gestured toward the chaos that had just unfolded outside. This feels off to you? Clarence met my eyes. You saw your husband tonight, and your best friend. You tell me, does it feel off? I swallowed hard. It feels like everything I believed just cracked in half. He nodded, not with pity, but understanding. Then it's time to stop playing your part. I looked away, trying to gather the splinters of my mind into something solid. Why now? Why tonight? Because they were going to use tonight, he said. Not just to sneak away, but to disappear. I don't think you were ever meant to see them again. His words landed like lead. I clenched the wallet in my lap tighter. You think they were going to leave the country? I think they still might, he replied. But not before making sure you wouldn't follow. A chill ran down my spine. He saw my expression and added, Naomi, do you trust me? I don't even know you. But you trusted your mother. I hesitated. Yes, with everything. Then trust this. She had her reasons for putting me in your life. I wanted to argue, but there was something in his voice that disarmed me. He wasn't trying to control the narrative. He was offering me space to breathe inside the truth. He leaned forward and opened the glove compartment. Inside was a small recording device, sleek, black, and discreet. What's that? Something you might need soon, he said, placing it in my hand. It's voice-activated, tiny. You can hide it in a bag, a drawer, anywhere. I turned it over in my palm. It felt heavier than it looked. I'm not ready for this, I whispered. No one ever is. I glanced back at the terminal. The flashing lights were gone now. The suspect, whoever he was, had been taken away. Life outside was moving on, but inside me, everything had stopped. You said I needed to go home. Pretend none of this happened. He nodded. Yes, you go home, you smile, you cook dinner. You act like tonight was just another late-night drop-off. You don't confront. Not yet. You want me to lie to him? I want you to protect yourself. If they're willing to run off together, what else are they willing to do? You can't play defense without knowing the rules of the game. A lump formed in my throat. And what if this is all just some horrible misunderstanding? What if I'm overreacting? Clarence didn't move. Then you'll have proof of your own strength. That's never wasted. I looked back down at the wallet. It was slightly worn, the edges frayed. Terrence was meticulous, but this thing looked like it had seen more life than he admitted. I hadn't even opened it yet. I didn't want to, because once I did, I'd have to accept whatever I found inside. Clarence reached over, unlocking the doors with a soft click. I'll follow behind just in case, he said. Not close, but close enough. I looked at him. Why are you doing this? Really? He gave me a long, quiet look, then said, because your mother believed in you, and because sometimes the strongest people need someone in their corner too. I nodded, a silent thank you caught in my throat. The drive home felt like floating underwater. The streets blurred by. I didn't remember pulling into the driveway or slipping through the front door like a thief in my own house. I only remember standing in the dark kitchen, alone, the wallet still in my hand. I placed it on the island and stared at it. I could hear Clarence's words echoing in my mind. They'll get sloppy. Let them. I flipped open the wallet, and there it was, a single boarding pass, one way, to Lisbon, not in Terrence's name, in Marla's. And folded neatly behind it, barely visible, was a printed document. I pulled it out. A life insurance policy, in my name, with Terrence listed as the sole beneficiary. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. Instead, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and whispered. So it's true. Whatever fantasy I had about misunderstandings, about innocent coincidences, it died right there, on that kitchen floor. They weren't just betraying me, they were planning to erase me. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I took Clarence's recorder, tucked it into a drawer, and walked to the bedroom. I slid under the covers and stared up at the ceiling. My life, as I knew it, was over, but my story? That was just beginning. I used to believe betrayal would come like a slap, sharp, sudden, loud. But the truth? It comes quietly, like the sound of a lock clicking shut behind you. The morning after I opened Terrence's wallet, I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or cry or break anything, even though every cell in my body begged for release. I just sat at the kitchen island in silence, staring into my coffee like it could give me answers. The house smelled like vanilla and lemon polish. Clean, normal, deceitfully peaceful. Terrence came downstairs looking like he hadn't slept either. His eyes were puffy, his shirt slightly wrinkled, but he still smiled, like nothing was amiss. "Didn't want to wake you last night," he said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "Flight got pushed. I figured I'd come back home instead of waiting around the terminal." I nodded and smiled back, tight-lipped, controlled. Actress, scene 1. "What's the wallet doing there?" he asked, spotting it on the counter. "You forgot it," I said simply. "Found it after you left." He reached for it quickly, too quickly, and let out a small, nervous laugh. Damn. No wonder I couldn't get an Uber at the airport. My whole life's in there. He flipped through it briefly and tucked it into his pocket like nothing was wrong. I just watched. He didn't ask if I'd opened it. Didn't even pretend to care. Maybe he didn't think I'd dare. Maybe he assumed I was still the same woman he could charm and distract with a bouquet and a kiss. But I wasn't. I wasn't that woman anymore. That night, Clarence and I met again in his Suburban, parked along an overlook near Freedom Parkway. The Atlanta skyline blinked in the distance, golden windows lighting up the horizon like secrets waiting to be exposed. "I need to see them again," I said. "Not through a document. I need to see them. With my own eyes." Clarence looked at me for a long moment. "You sure?" "Yes." We drove in silence to the airport, the same terminal, the same time Terrence claimed he'd been stranded the night before. Something in my gut told me this was their meeting place. Public, chaotic, easy to blend into. People come and go without notice. No one asks questions in a place built for departures. Clarence parked at the edge of the parking garage, one level above the terminal. "Look down, third window from the left," he said. I leaned forward, heart pounding in my ears. And there they were, Terrence and Marla, not hand in hand like I expected. No soft gazes. No romantic tension. They were fighting. It wasn't a lover's spat. It was desperate, sharp, silent, but the energy between them screamed. Marla's jaw moved quickly, furiously. She waved her arms, shoved a folder into his chest. He pushed it back. She stepped in close, said something inches from his face. His lips tightened. He looked away, then turned back and snapped something at her. They weren't planning their escape anymore. They were trying to salvage a plan that was falling apart. My first instinct was confusion. Then something darker settled in, satisfaction. Their alliance was cracking. I wasn't the only one waking up. Greed and fear were turning them against each other. Clarence handed me a pair of compact binoculars. "Watch closely," he said. I zoomed in and saw Marla's face. It was twisted, hard. Nothing like the woman who once braided my hair at sleepovers and cried during my mother's funeral. Her hand grabbed Terrence's arm, his shoulders tensed, jaw clenching like he wanted to strike the air between them. Or her. Then suddenly he looked up, straight toward the parking deck. I ducked, heart slamming. "He didn't see us," Clarence said, "but it's coming apart. You were right." I sat back, hands shaking in my lap. "They're scared." "Good," Clarence said. "Let them be." For a few minutes, I didn't speak. I just watched them dissolve from a distance, their silhouettes swallowed by the constant motion of travelers and airport workers. Marla turned and walked off toward the escalators. Terrence stood still, shoulders heaving slightly, before slamming his fist against the railing. Clarence leaned back in his seat. "Still want to confront them?" "No," I said slowly. "I want them to feel what I felt. Confused. Powerless. Alone." He nodded. "That's when people make mistakes." On the way home, I stared out the window, the city lights blurring like watercolors. I wasn't crying. The grief had burned out already. What was left was sharper, cold, clean, and deliberate. At home, I went through the motions. I greeted Terrence with a kiss, asked about his day, told him mine was long. He seemed distracted, jittery, like a man waiting for a phone call that wouldn't come. And when he showered, I planted the device Clarence gave me, a small microphone, no bigger than a thumbtack, inside the leather lining of his briefcase. My hands trembled, but my mind was quiet. Afterward, I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. My skin was paler than usual, my eyes darker, more sunken. I didn't recognize the woman staring back, but I respected her. She wasn't a victim. Not anymore. Later that night, when Terrence was asleep beside me, I sat alone in the study, flipping through one of my mother's old journals. The spine was cracked, the ink faded in places. I ran my fingers over her handwriting, so fluid and fearless. A quote was scribbled on the inside cover in her slanted script. "The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire." I closed the book and whispered to the empty room, "I'm ready now, Mom." Then I picked up my phone and texted Clarence just 2 words. "Let's begin." They say the devil's in the details, but I think the devil hides in the ordinary. The forgotten wallet sat on the counter like nothing more than a man's mistake. But I knew better now. I'd stared into the eyes of my husband through glass walls and watched my best friend argue with him like they'd built an entire life behind my back. And the wallet, that was their loose thread. After Clarence left that night, I waited until the house was still. Terrence had gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion, mumbling something about a client call running late tomorrow. I watched him climb the stairs, listening for the creak in the 4th step that always betrayed his footsteps. Then I stood in the kitchen, staring at that simple black wallet as if it were ticking. I pulled on gloves, silly maybe, but instinctive. I didn't know if I was protecting evidence or just myself. Slowly, deliberately, I opened the folds. The credit cards, receipts, and license were all there, exactly where they should be. Normal, boring. But tucked behind the last card slot was a folded slip of paper, white, crisp, and almost too perfect to belong in something so worn. I unfolded it. A boarding pass, one way, Lisbon. The name on the ticket wasn't Terrence's. Marla V. Jensen, my best friend. My breath hitched, and I had to grip the counter. But it wasn't shock. It was confirmation. A cruel reward for all the tiny alarms I'd silenced over the years. The late-night texts. The way she lingered too long at our parties. The time I caught her wearing one of my scarves and laughed it off. God, how much had I ignored just to keep my life from unraveling? I turned the ticket over and froze. A second paper had been folded underneath. It was longer, formal, legal, and it had my name on it. Naomi Elaine Bennett. A life insurance policy, 2.5 million signed. Witnessed, dated 6 months ago. Terrence listed as the sole beneficiary. The same month he started talking about stress and needing space. The same month Marla began pulling away from our brunches. The same month I stopped sleeping through the night without knowing why. I backed away from the counter, clutching the papers like they were burning my skin. My knees almost buckled. I lowered myself onto the cold tile floor, the documents trembling in my lap. I remembered the night I signed the policy. We'd been drinking red wine on the back patio. Terrence told me it was a practical move. I was running a gallery, he said, traveling more, taking on risk. What if something happened, he'd asked, brushing hair from my face. I couldn't bear it. I just need to know you're protected, and I can honor your legacy if the worst ever comes. I remember laughing. So morbid, I said. And him smiling back, that charming tilt of his head. It's love, baby, responsible love. I had kissed him, I had signed, and I had been played. I don't know how long. I sat there before I heard a soft knock on the back door. Clarence. I let him in without a word. He didn't ask any questions, just looked at me, my pale face, trembling hands, the open wallet on the counter. You found something, he said quietly. I handed him the papers. He studied them without reacting. They were going to disappear. Marla first. Terrence would probably stay back to make it look like a tragedy. Console your friends. Play the grieving husband. Wait a respectable time before joining her overseas. I swallowed bile. You think he'd actually try to? Clarence looked me in the eye. I think men like him don't need to pull the trigger themselves. All they need is the right mix of timing, trust, and something in your tea, I flinched. He softened. But you're not drinking anything he gives you now, are you? No, I said quickly. Not after this. I couldn't even look him in the face tonight. Clarence pulled a small recorder from his pocket, setting it gently on the table. We plant this tomorrow. You go back into character. You do what you've always done. Make him feel safe, unseen, like the perfect wife. While this, he tapped the recorder, catches what's under the surface. I don't know if I can keep pretending, I whispered. He leaned forward. You can, because you already are. You walked past him tonight and smiled, Naomi. You didn't flinch. That takes strength. I nodded slowly, eyes still on the policy. He made it so easy, so believable. I didn't just love him. I trusted him with my life. Clarence didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, Your mother once told me trust is a weapon in the wrong hands, but in the right hands, it's armor. She trusted you'd survive what she couldn't predict. My eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from something deeper, something rooted in legacy. My mother had survived so much. She'd built shelters, saved women, stood up to corrupt men with deep pockets and louder voices. But she must have known, deep down, that I'd face my own storm one day. And now, here I was. I stood up, steadied myself. I'll do it. I'll plant the recorder. Clarence handed it to me. Good. Start tomorrow, one lie at a time. The next morning, I woke early and acted like nothing had changed. I made coffee, kissed Terence's cheek, told him to have a good day. While he showered, I slipped into his office, opened his leather briefcase, and tucked the recorder inside a hidden seam under the lining. A clean spot. He'd never notice. The adrenaline made my hands steady. Later, I stood at the mirror and looked at myself, not with vanity, but curiosity. My hair was in its usual waves, my skin smooth, my lips painted in a nude gloss Terence always said he liked. But I didn't see his wife anymore. I saw a woman rebuilding her identity piece by piece. A woman who was done being a symbol of loyalty and love. I had tried. God knows I had tried. And now I would be the storm. That night, after Terence left for his strategy dinner, I went up to the attic and tucked the policy, the ticket, and the wallet deep behind my mother's old sewing machine, under a false panel I remembered she had built years ago for emergency cash. How poetic. I sat up there for a while, cross-legged on the floor, reading the first page of her old journal. Her handwriting, slanted and bold, stared back at me. Forgiveness is for me. Justice is for the world. But clarity is the gift I give myself. I closed the book, clutched it to my chest, and whispered, I see clearly now, Mom. I do. I always thought the hardest part of betrayal was the moment you discovered it. The sting, the shock, the shattering. I was wrong. The hardest part is pretending you don't know. That morning, I woke up before Terence. The sky outside was a faded indigo, the kind of early that feels sacred. I slipped out of bed and padded down to the kitchen, the floorboards creaking beneath my bare feet. Everything looked the same, coffee mugs lined up neatly on the rack, fruit bowl perfectly arranged, his travel mug on the counter like always. But I had changed. I was no longer the wife. I was the actress, and it was showtime. When he came down, still toweling his damp hair, I had already made breakfast, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, fresh berries. He blinked at me like I was a mirage. Well, damn, this looks amazing, he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Everything okay? Why wouldn't it be? I smiled brightly. He paused, just a beat. I don't know, you've just seemed tired lately. I poured coffee into his travel mug. Well, I'm trying to get back to myself. Thought I'd start with feeding you. He chuckled, relaxed. The tension I'd seen in his eyes the night before softened. I watched him eat like nothing was wrong, like we hadn't crossed a line we could never come back from. Inside, I was screaming, but on the surface, I was silk. After he left, I sat at the edge of the sofa, fingers wrapped around my coffee cup, listening to silence. Not a peaceful kind, but the loaded, cinematic silence before everything explodes. I opened my phone and texted Clarence one word, planted. He responded immediately, good, let the story unfold. That day, I stayed home from the gallery. Said I had a migraine. Truth was, I needed space, time, to study the mask I was now wearing and make sure it didn't slip. I walked through the house slowly, touching every familiar object like I was seeing it for the first time. The gold-framed wedding photo on the hallway shelf, the antique vase Marla helped me choose for our 3rd anniversary, the throw blanket Mom gave us for Christmas, before she passed, before everything broke. I stopped at the mirror in the upstairs hallway. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because she looked different, but because something behind her eyes had shifted. It wasn't sadness or rage anymore. It was control. That afternoon, I took out my mother's journal again. The leather was soft with age, corners worn like skin from use. I flipped to the dog-eared page where I had left a pressed jasmine flower years ago. The price of peace is awareness, and the currency of self-respect is boundaries. I whispered it to myself like a prayer. When the sun dipped low, I set the next scene in motion. I called Terrence and asked if he'd be home for dinner. He sounded surprised but said yes. I cooked lasagna from scratch, his favorite, lit candles, put on music I hadn't touched in years, something soulful and slow, like the kind of love we used to have. He arrived right on time, briefcase in hand, the same briefcase I'd bugged the night before. His eyes scanned the room. "What's the occasion?" "Just missed you," I said sweetly. We ate in peace, or at least he did. I pushed food around my plate, managing polite laughter when necessary. He told me about a new client deal, some expansion proposal. His words drifted in and out like white noise. I was focused on the briefcase, on the tiny microphone tucked between the seams, on what he might say when he thought I wasn't listening. After dinner, he poured wine, sat beside me on the couch, and rubbed my shoulders like he hadn't rehearsed it a dozen times with someone else. "I missed this," he said. "Me too," I lied. Then he kissed me. I let him. That night, as he slept beside me, his arms slung across my waist, I stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above. My heart beat steady, calm. I wasn't afraid anymore. The next morning, before he woke, I went to the sunroom. The one I'd turned into a little reading corner over the years. The same room where my mother once sat and told me, "You can love someone and still know they're wrong for you." I had nodded then, not understanding. I understood now. I pulled out the recorder from the office safe Clarence had given me, plugged it in, waited. Terrence's voice played clear as glass. "I've done everything right. Naomi's playing her part. She's not suspicious. I can handle the will. She just needs to sign the revised estate plan. Then it's done. It's clean." Pause. Then Marla's voice, clipped and cold. "You said that last month. What if she finds the ticket? What if she opens your wallet?" His answer chilled me. "She's too trusting. That's why it works." My throat went dry. They were still planning, still thinking they could get away with it, still calling me too trusting. Even as I sat in the next room, listening to them plot my erasure, I didn't cry. Instead, I wrote in the journal, "Tonight, I saw myself clearly. Not as the wife, not as the victim, but as the witness. The story is changing. I am no longer being written. I'm writing." Later, I locked the audio in a secure drive Clarence had given me. That evening, I walked into the bedroom as Terrence finished a call. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Just work," he replied, avoiding eye contact. I smiled. "Busy week?" "Very." He kissed my forehead and said, "We should plan a getaway soon, just us." I leaned into his chest. "That sounds perfect." And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't playing a role anymore. I was becoming it. The actress wasn't pretending. She was preparing. Trust is like glass. Once shattered, even if you try to piece it back together, the cracks remain, staring at you, daring you to forget how it broke. The morning after I heard Terrence's voice on that recording, heard him call me too trusting, I stood in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, watching him behind me in the mirror. He was humming, not a care in the world. I remember staring at his reflection, feeling a strange calm settle in. It was the calm of a woman no longer afraid of the fire because she finally understood she could walk through it and not burn. He walked up behind me, shirtless, towel slung over one shoulder. He wrapped his arms around my waist and kissed my neck. "Morning, beautiful." "Morning," I replied, wiping toothpaste from my mouth like nothing had changed. But everything had. He handed me a small bottle. By the way, these came in from Switzerland. Vitamins, imported blend, great for energy and skin. The bottle was unlabeled, sleek dark amber glass with a twist cap. I took it from him slowly. "Switzerland?" He nodded. "Friend of mine runs a clinic over there. Exclusive stuff. I've been using them. Figured you could benefit too." I smiled, shaking 2 pills into my hand. "You first." He laughed. "Already took mine." Of course he had. I made a show of swallowing them with a sip of orange juice, then excused myself. I'll be in the garden for a bit. Once outside, I walked calmly to the side of the house, behind the shed, and spat the pills into a napkin I'd tucked into my robe pocket. My hands were steady now, no shaking. I tucked the napkin into a sandwich bag, sealed it, and slid it into my purse. Clarence would have it tested by noon. When I returned inside, Terence was already gone. I stood in the center of the kitchen and let the silence wash over me. There was something incredibly cruel about watching a man poison you with a smile. By lunchtime, Clarence sent a message. Preliminary analysis. Compound includes zolpidem, but traces of something stronger. Likely triazolam or similar. We're confirming, but you were right not to take them. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because right then, I knew it was no longer about suspicion. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was attempted erasure. They didn't just want me gone emotionally. They wanted me gone, physically. I sat on the couch, clutching my mother's journal like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I flipped through the pages, searching for something, anything that would feel like direction. And there it was, in her looping script, dated a year before her death. If someone ever tries to take everything from you, your name, your legacy, your life, don't scream. Don't fight. Just take back the pen, write the next page, but make sure they never forget they're not in control. I exhaled. I hear you, Mom. Later that day, Clarence came by. We sat in the back of his SUV parked a few streets away from my house, like two spies hiding in plain sight. He handed me an envelope. Inside were the lab results. Confirmed, he said. Sedatives, powerful ones. Enough to disorient you for hours. Combine that with, say, a glass of wine. It could cause blackouts. And if mixed with even mild alcohol long-term, liver damage may be worse. My stomach turned. He was priming me, I said. Bit by bit. Make me weaker, foggy, vulnerable. Clarence nodded. Exactly. And when something finally happened, a fall down the stairs, an accidental overdose, he'd already have his story ready. A chill ran through me, not just from the information, but from how calm I felt hearing it. That recording we got last night, Clarence continued. There's more. They're planning something soon. He handed me an audio file on a flash drive. I listened through the car stereo. Marla's voice. We don't have much time. She's getting nosy. Terence. I'm handling it. 1 more week. She signs the new estate doc, and it's done. Marla. What if she figures it out before then? Terence. She won't. Naomi trusts me. She always has. Clarence paused the audio. Do you? He asked. I met his eyes. Not anymore. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said something I hadn't said aloud yet. I feel stupid. You're not. I let them lie to me for years. You let them lie, Clarence said. Because you were kind. Because you believed in people. That's not a weakness, Naomi. That's what made you dangerous to them. Dangerous? He smiled. You have a soul. They don't. That makes you unpredictable. That makes you powerful. I looked away, swallowing the emotion rising in my throat. Then Clarence said something that made me stop cold. Naomi, what do you want to do now? It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me that in a long time. Not what I felt or what I feared, but what I wanted. I stared out the window for a long time before answering. I want them to see me coming, I said. But only when it's too late to run. Clarence nodded slowly. And until then, he asked. I took a breath. Until then, I'll keep smiling. That night, I sat across from Terence at dinner. He poured wine. I raised my glass. He asked about the gallery, about a potential exhibit. I told him about an imaginary artist from DC, whose work I claimed to love. We laughed. He looked relaxed. And when he slid the bottle of vitamins across the table to me, I smiled and said, Thank you for always taking care of me. He beamed. And in that moment, I felt it. Not pain, not rage, just clarity. He had no idea the woman sitting across from him was the same woman who had already started rewriting the ending. You never forget the moment you sit across from someone who would rather see you dead than divorced. That night, as I lit the candles on the dining table, my hands didn't shake. I was calm, Eerily so. The kind of calm that comes after pain has already burned itself out. I had played the good wife, the doting friend, the perfect hostess. But tonight I would play God. It started with an invitation. Text to Marla. Terrence and I are hosting a little dinner, just us three. I'd love to see you, like old times. She replied within minutes. Of course, what time should I come? Of course. Terrence, when I told him, looked up from his phone like I'd spoken in another language. Marla? You invited Marla? I smiled. Yes. I think it's time we had an honest, healing evening, don't you? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, sure, that's a good idea. He lied too, just like I did. The table was set for 3, with white linen napkins and the gold-rimmed plates we got from Italy on our honeymoon. Back when honeymoon still meant something. I cooked lemon herb chicken, with roasted potatoes and broccolini, and uncorked a bottle of red that I knew Marla loved. I wanted everything to be perfect. Not for their comfort, but for their illusion. They still believed they were in control. Terrence was first to arrive home. His eyes scanned the table, then flicked to me. You went all out, he said, loosening his tie. I wanted this to be special, I replied. Tonight's important. He raised a brow but said nothing. Marla arrived 10 minutes later, dressed in soft beige silk and heels, just high enough to show effort, but not desperation. Her lipstick matched the wine, deep, blood-toned. She smiled too widely. Naomi, you look beautiful. So do you, I lied. We sat. We toasted. To old friends, I said, holding my glass. To new beginnings, Marla added quickly. To trust, Terrence said last. And I had to choke down the laugh rising in my throat. The meal passed in a blur of surface-level conversation. I let them play their parts, let them speak in tones too cheerful, with laughs that didn't quite reach their eyes. I watched how their glances darted around me instead of at me. They were uncomfortable, not because of guilt, they were far past that, but because they knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. And then I gave it to them. I set down my fork and said, almost dreamily, You know, I had the strangest dream last week. They both paused. A vivid one. Felt like it lasted all night. I was in an airport watching a man and a woman argue. It was intense, desperate, something about a plan, one that had fallen apart. Marla's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Terrence swallowed, hard. In the dream, I continued, I couldn't see their faces at first, but then they turned, and I recognized them. They were people I loved once, trusted deeply, people I thought would never hurt me. I smiled softly, keeping my voice even. They didn't know I was watching them. They thought they were alone, thought their secret was safe. Terrence forced a chuckle. You always have these wild dreams. I do, I said, but this one ended differently than usual. How so? Marla asked, her voice tight. In the end, I forgave them, I said. I forgave the man I once believed in, because I finally understood. He wasn't who I thought he was. He was only a reflection of who I needed him to be. Silence. And the woman, I went on, turning to Marla. I forgave her too. Not because she asked for it, not because she earned it, but because I realized carrying her betrayal would only poison me, not her. Marla's eyes flicked to Terrence. I leaned back in my chair. But what I couldn't forgive was the greed. The kind that wraps itself in affection and calls it care. The kind that plans things, quietly, carefully. Terrence's smile cracked. That's not a dream anymore, is it? He asked. I tilted my head. Why do you say that? He didn't answer. I stood and walked to the sideboard. From the top drawer, I pulled out an envelope and placed it gently on the table. What's this? Marla asked. My updated will, I said. It's official, notarized, sent to my lawyer and filed. If anything happens to me, even something as innocent as slipping in the shower, everything I own goes directly to the Elaine Bennett Foundation. Terrence stared at it like it was a bomb. The gallery, I continued. The house, the trust, the art, every cent. None of it will go to a spouse or a designated beneficiary. Not anymore. Marla's face turned white. No offense, I said calmly, but I figured I should take care of my own legacy before someone else decides to do it for me. Terrence cleared his throat. Naomi, what is this? Are you accusing? I'm not accusing anyone of anything, I cut in, still smiling. I'm protecting myself. Isn't that what you always say, Terrence? Fail to plan, plan to fail? Marla stood abruptly. I should go. Of course, I said sweetly. She didn't say goodbye, just grabbed her clutch and walked out like the room was on fire. Terrence lingered. Why are you doing this? He asked. I met his gaze. Because I finally stopped lying to myself. He looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for the woman he used to manipulate. He didn't find her. He left without another word. And I cleared the table, slowly, one dish at a time. My hands were steady, my heart quiet. Later that night, I slipped into bed alone. I stared at the ceiling and let the silence blanket me. I didn't feel anger. I felt peace. Because I wasn't waiting anymore, I wasn't afraid. I had taken back the pen. And the ending? That would be mine to write. There's a strange kind of stillness that settles over a house after a storm. Not the kind you hear with thunder and rain. I mean the kind that happens after the truth has been spoken out loud. When all masks have cracked, and the people who once smiled at you can't look you in the eye anymore. That's the silence I lived in after the dinner. Terrence barely spoke to me the next morning. He poured his coffee with shaky hands, spilled a few drops on the counter, then wiped them like a man possessed by something brittle and frantic. Marla didn't call, didn't text. Not a single chirp from the woman who used to flood my inbox with memes and thinking of you messages. Their quiet told me everything. I could feel it. Plans shifting behind closed doors. Strategies being rewritten in whispers and hallway glances. But I didn't stop them. I gave them space to move. To think they still had time. Because when people think they're free, that's when they step right into the trap. And the trap was ready. Clarence and I had mapped it out for weeks. The warehouse was an old property my mother bought years ago and never sold. Tucked behind an abandoned industrial block in Decatur. No cameras, no neighbors, just peeling brick, creaky floorboards, and one reinforced steel door. I moved the documents there, copies of the life insurance policy, the flight itinerary, bank transfers, the audio recordings. Everything filed, labeled, waiting. All I needed was them to take the bait. And they did. The text came on a Tuesday, from a burner number. We need to talk, urgent, come alone. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, Clarence called. Movement, he said. They're circling the house, hired help, rental car with fake tags. They think you're out. I was watching them from 3 blocks away, through a live feed Clarence had rigged with hidden cameras, my own home, playing out like a crime scene in slow motion. Terrence entered first. Keys still worked, though not for long. Marla followed, bundled in a hoodie, trying to look invisible. They moved fast, rummaging through drawers, flipping cushions, pulling books from shelves. Terrence made his way upstairs. Marla took the office. A third man followed them inside, someone I didn't recognize. Sloppy-looking, nervous. Likely the one they'd hired to do the final deed if it ever came to that. But tonight, they weren't looking to kill. They were looking to recover, or steal, or destroy. What they didn't know was the house was already clean. Everything of value was gone. All clues, all evidence, locked away elsewhere. I had wiped every drawer, cleared every document, even staged a few false leads. A dummy envelope in the safe, a printed-out calendar marked with fake meetings. It was never about stopping them. It was about watching them prove their guilt. And they did. On camera, I watched as Marla opened the nightstand drawer in my bedroom and cursed. Under her breath, she was looking for the flight ticket, the copy of the insurance policy. She didn't find it. Terrence punched the wall so hard, he left a dent in the drywall. I watched them come apart, right there in the place I once called home. I pressed a button on the tablet beside me. The feed switched to live audio. Marla. She's on to us. This was stupid. We should have left when I said. Terrence. You panicked. She was bluffing. There's no way she could have known, unless you left something behind, Marla. Don't turn this on me, Terrence. You've been sloppy since the beginning, Marla. You're the one who told me it would be clean. Their voices rose, messy and fast and angry. And then mine entered the room, not in person, on a screen. A television in the living room flickered on as Clarence cued the footage. It was a simple pre-recorded message. Just me, sitting on a bench in the sunroom, calm, poised. "Terrence," Marla, my voice said through the speakers. "I hope you're comfortable." Marla froze. Terrence turned toward the screen like he'd seen a ghost. "I figured you'd stop by," I continued. "After all, unfinished business has a way of dragging people back." I watched them panic, Marla spinning around, trying to find the camera, Terrence yelling at the third man to shut it down. But there was nothing to shut. It wasn't live. It was a performance. One final scene in the house that used to be mine. "You may be wondering what I want," I said on the screen, "but it's not revenge. It's not justice. It's truth." Marla. "Turn it off, Terrence. It's too late." "I trusted you both," my voice went on, "with my home, my life. And you took that trust and turned it into a weapon. I don't want it back. I don't want anything from you." I paused in the recording. "But you should know, the police have everything, the documents, the audio, the pills, the financial records. It's all been delivered, along with the footage of tonight's little visit." Terrence let out a quiet, broken sound. And then I said the one thing I knew would haunt them. Greed is a hungry thing. It devours everything in its path, even the people who created it. The screen faded to black, and in that empty house, the only sound was panic. Clarence turned to me in the surveillance van. "They're running," I nodded. "Let them. But they'll head for the warehouse." I smiled faintly. "Exactly." As they bolted out the door, I watched my former husband and former best friend drive toward their own undoing. And I didn't feel pity or hate, I felt peace. Because I had finally stopped mourning the life they stole from me, and started building the life I was meant to have. There's a moment, just before justice finds its target, when everything goes still, the world holds its breath. And if you've done it right, if you've planned every step with precision and patience, it's in that moment that you stop being the hunted and become the one holding the knife. I had waited for this, not out of revenge. That fire had long since cooled into something sharper, focused, strategic. I wanted truth, and truth, like light, exposes everything. Clarence and I were parked across from the old Bennett warehouse, a forgotten building my mother had once purchased for a community arts project that never came to be. Now it stood like a quiet sentinel, waiting to witness the last gasp of two people who had built a castle out of lies. He handed me the earpiece. "They just left your house." "They find anything?" I asked. Clarence shook his head. "Nothing but staged chaos. Just enough to keep them guessing." I smiled. Every drawer I'd left slightly open, every decoy file, the half-written fake journal entry planted in my closet. It was all intentional. I wanted them desperate. I wanted them reckless. Because when people are afraid, they move fast. And fast people make mistakes. Sure enough, 22 minutes later, the gray SUV pulled into the gravel lot. No hesitation. They knew where they were going. "They're here," Clarence confirmed. I sat up straighter. Let it roll. Inside the warehouse, we'd left everything just the way they'd expect it. Unfinished, cold, with a steel table in the center, holding a black safe and a simple handwritten note. "You want the truth? Here it is." From the live feed, I saw them hesitate just outside the warehouse entrance. Terrence looked furious, jaw tight, eyes scanning the shadows. Marla looked strung out. Her hair was messy, her eyeliner smudged. She hadn't slept. They stepped inside. I could hear the gravel crunch under their shoes, the hum of the overhead fluorescent lights, their breathing. Then I heard Terrence say, "There it is." He moved to the table fast, running his hand over the safe. "This is it. This has to be it." Marla hovered behind him. "Naomi set this up. You know she did." "She doesn't have it in her," he snapped. My laugh was silent. If only he knew. "She's bluffing," he insisted, crouching by the keypad. "We take what's inside, we're done. We vanish. Unless it's a trap. Then let's find out." He punched in 4 numbers. My birthday. Of course. Narcissists always assume you'll build your world around them. Even your codes. The safe clicked open, the lid creaked, and then silence. They stood over the contents in stunned disbelief. Inside wasn't money, it was truth. Printouts of every transfer they made to offshore accounts, copies of the flight itinerary, the photos of them at the airport, the life insurance policy, the forged signatures, and the dar, pills sealed in evidence bags, labeled and logged. But the centerpiece, a printed transcript of their last private conversation, the one where they talked about my eventual accident, and the revised estate documents. Terrence's voice had been bold on that call. She's soft, always has been. She'll sign what I give her. Now it stared back at him in black and white. Marla read in silence, her eyes growing wider with each page. Then she turned on him. You said she didn't know. You told me we were clean. He barked a bitter laugh. Don't act like you weren't in this. You pushed for Lisbon. You wanted this. I didn't want to kill her. You were fine cashing the check. They were unraveling right on cue. She's watching us, Marla hissed. I know she is. And that's when the television screen flickered on. A pre-recorded video of me appeared, sitting in my mother's old sunroom, dressed in white, calm and composed. I watched from the surveillance van as their heads whipped toward the sound. Hi, I said on screen. If you're watching this. Well, I suppose you thought you were winning. Marla stumbled back like she'd been slapped. I know you think you're smart, I said. But the thing about playing a long game is, it's not about who moves first, it's about who finishes. Terrence cursed under his breath. I trusted you both, I continued. I would have given you everything, my loyalty, my resources, my love. And you took it. You twisted it into something unrecognizable, something cruel. There was a pause in the video. My digital self leaned forward. But I'm not angry anymore. I've simply stepped out of your story. I watched them freeze as sirens began wailing in the distance. Clarence turned to me. They're here. Multiple squad cars pulled into the lot. Lights flashing, tires grinding gravel. Officers in plainclothes and tactical gear moved swiftly toward the entrance. Go time, Clarence said. We both stepped out of the van just as the police breached the warehouse. Inside, I could hear the chaos, shouting, confusion, the sound of cuffs clicking tight. I didn't walk in until the noise had stilled, and then I did. Terrence saw me first. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. Marla sat slumped against the wall, tears streaking her makeup, whispering to herself. You, he said, his voice cracked. You did this. I stepped into the light. No, you did. You don't have to do this, he said desperately. Please, we can fix this. There's nothing left to fix, I said. You broke something that doesn't mend. I was scared. No, I said, voice steady. You were greedy. He looked down. Marla whimpered. Naomi, I didn't mean for it to go this far. You meant for it to go just far enough to benefit you, I interrupted. The rest was collateral. I walked closer. I don't hate you, I said. Not anymore. Terrence blinked. I pity you, I continued. You almost killed a woman who loved you. And for what? A bank account? A house? A new country? That's not ambition. That's cowardice wrapped in Armani. The officers began moving them toward the exit. And just before he stepped through the door, Terrence turned one last time. Why didn't you just leave me, he asked. Why go this far? I tilted my head. Because if I had left quietly, you would have told the world I was the crazy one. He said nothing, and then he was gone. Clarence came up behind me, quiet as ever. You okay? I nodded slowly. Lighter than I've felt in years, we stood there in the empty warehouse for a moment. The storm had passed, and I had survived. No, I had emerged. It still amazes me how quiet airports can be at sunrise. There's a hum, sure, rollers clicking across tile, quiet announcements echoing through wide halls, the occasional burst of laughter from a family chasing a gate. But underneath it all, there's stillness, like the sky is waiting for you to decide what kind of day you're going to have. I stood at gate 17, passport in hand, boarding pass tucked into the back of my book. And for the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't rehearsing excuses. I wasn't hoping someone would love me better. I was just present. The flight was to Rome, one way, not an escape, but a homecoming of a different kind. 6 months had passed since the warehouse, since the cuffs clicked. since the lies finally collapsed under the weight of truth. I'd asked myself more than once whether it would feel like victory, watching Terrence and Marla dragged out of that space, faces stunned, voices cracking, but it didn't. Not really, it felt like breath. Like stepping out of a locked room into fresh air. I never visited them in jail, never wrote, never even read the letters they sent me. Yes, there were letters. Terrence wrote 3. The first was denial, the second was rage, the third, I didn't even open. Some endings don't need words. What I focused on instead was rebuilding. Not just my name, my finances, my reputation, but something deeper. The parts of me I'd tucked away while trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect friend, the woman who made herself smaller so others could shine brighter. I started with the foundation, my mother's legacy. The Elaine Bennett Fund had always existed, but it had never lived. Until now. We expanded outreach, opened our first transitional housing program for women leaving financially abusive marriages. I sat in those rooms, listened to stories that mirrored mine in the strangest and saddest ways. Stories of women whose names were erased from deeds, whose bank accounts were drained, whose voices were dimmed by men who smiled in public and plotted in private. I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt solidarity. They weren't broken. They were survivors learning to reintroduce themselves to themselves. Just like I had, I also restructured the gallery, handed off daily management to one of my assistants, a sharp, brilliant young woman named Sasha. I still curated, still walked through the rooms, and stood beneath the art. But I wasn't living there anymore. That space belonged to more than just my ambition now. It belonged to community, to mentorship, to the future. And Clarence? He never left. He didn't hover, he didn't smother, he didn't protect me like I was porcelain. He simply stayed. He drove me to court on days I had to face lawyers and loopholes. He sat beside me in silence when I needed company, and vanished when I needed solitude. He didn't ask for anything but honesty. So I gave it. A few weeks ago, I handed him a key. To what? He asked. To the lake house, I replied. I had it redone. You're the only person who's ever made me feel safe, without making me feel small. He didn't say much, just took the key and pressed it to his heart. I knew what that meant. This morning, he drove me to the airport in his usual calm silence. We didn't talk much. I stared out the window as the city rolled by, alive and unapologetic. At the terminal drop-off, he stepped out and helped with my carry-on. You're really going then, he said. I smiled. You didn't think I'd back out, did you? No, he said. But it's going to feel different with you gone. I handed him a sealed envelope. In here is a list of women I want you to check on while I'm away. Survivors from the pilot program. They trust you. And you? He asked. Still trust me? With my life, I said. But more importantly, with my story. He nodded, his jaw tightening the way it does when he's trying not to show too much emotion. Then he reached into his coat and handed me something small. Worn leather, edges frayed. The wallet. That wallet. I stared at it, stunned. You kept it? Found it behind the panel in your mother's sewing box, he said. Didn't know if you'd want to keep it or throw it into the sea. I took it with both hands. For a long moment, I just looked at it. The thing that started it all. The trigger, the proof, the first domino. Do you want to come with me? I asked. Not really sure what I hoped he'd say, but he smiled gently. Not yet. This leg is yours to walk alone. I nodded. We didn't say goodbye. Just, see you. I turned and walked toward security. Pulled out my ID, slid off my shoes, placed the wallet in the bin. As it disappeared through the scanner, I made a choice. Right there at the end of the belt. I reached over, picked it up, and walked to the nearest trash bin. Opened it. Paused. Then slowly, I reached inside the wallet and pulled out the only thing I had left inside. A photo. Me and my mother. On a park bench, laughing, wind in our hair, before life got complicated. I kissed the photo gently, folded it into the back of my passport, and dropped the empty wallet into the bin. Gone. Not in anger, in release. As I walked to my gate, my chest felt light, my spine taller, my steps steady. There was no one waiting at the other end of this flight. No lover, no deal, no grand plan. Just Rome, and then Florence, and then maybe Lisbon, this time on my own terms. But most importantly, there was me. The version of myself I hadn't met until all the noise fell away. The version that didn't exist to please, to perform, or to prove. As I stood in line to board, I took one last look at the concourse behind me. It looked exactly the same, but I didn't. And that, finally, was enough. There are losses that seem like they'll destroy us. But in truth, they are life's way of removing what no longer deserves to stay. Naomi didn't just repay the debt that fate once forced into her hands. She forgave, but she didn't forget. She didn't win by screaming, but with the calm strength of someone who knows her own worth. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge is living a life where those who hurt us no longer have a place in it. If you've ever been in a situation that made you lose faith in family, in love, or even in yourself, I invite you to share a few words below. Not to dwell on suffering, but to know this: you are not alone. And sometimes, all it takes is one person speaking up to help hundreds of others begin to heal.